Hi, I'm Laura.
And I'm Lowell.
And today we have Naomi. This is Naomi Block Manners Stern, who's a dear friend, and we're here to interview her.
We're very happy. What you don't know, but you'll know that we tell you, as this is the first interview Laura and I are doing since the last one we did when I was here last summer working from Israel, living in Riverdale, working on the Laura and Lowell show. This is the first interview since I've come back now in January for 2 weeks to work on the show a little bit more, and I'll be back again during the year. So we're talking to Mrs. Stern, and we're very happy to have the privilege to do so.
Thank you, Naomi.
You're very welcome.
What are we talking about with Mrs. Stern today, Laura?
Well, I was thinking maybe you could share with the public about your career and how you got started.
And Mrs. Roosevelt.
And Mrs. Eleanor Roosevelt. Thank you, Michael.
The connection to Eleanor Roosevelt happened when I was at Hunter College many, many years ago. I have just celebrated my 70th year away from college. Seems to me
Amazing.
it was yesterday because the memories are so vivid. I met Eleanor Roosevelt my senior year at college. The summer before it started, I was selected to go to a leadership institute in Campobello with 29 other student leaders throughout the country, from throughout the country. And there we were privileged to meet many dignitaries, among whom, of course, was Mrs. Roosevelt, since she hosted the group at her home.
Mrs. Stern, where is Campobello?
Campobello is outside of Canada, and it is an independent island.
Near New Brunswick?
Yes, near New Brunswick. It's a very wonderful place to retreat to. And it was like a retreat in a way because we were a captive audience who was privileged to meet many dignitaries, among whom was Felix Frankfurter, Louis Fisher, many other people who were famous came to visit us that summer. But since Mrs. Roosevelt was the hostess, she spent an inordinate amount of time with us. And because I lived in New York, and that was close proximity to Washington, and of course she had a home in New York, I became more friendly with her than many of the other students. I invited her to come to college in October of that very summer.
Hunter College.
Hunter
You've
College.
been a little bit modest, Mrs. Stern. You didn't tell our audience you were president of the student body.
Well, that's how I became, I was a student leader, and that's why I was selected to go to Campobello. But in my year following, I had her come to the college, and of course she was very well received by the students and by the community. After the incident in October, which is when she came first to Hunter at my request, I was going to Washington. No, I was going actually to Minnesota to a student federation conference where we were taking up lots of student issues. And I was coming through Washington, and I wrote to her asking her advice about lobbying some senators about the National Youth Administration Program, which was a program to help poor students. She was very, very supportive of my going, and she invited me to stop and stay at the White House for a few days on my way back, which I did. And that is where all the excitement began.
That's wonderful.
Now I can tell you that the days at the White House were very full. I did my lobbying in the Senate and in the Congress. I met various senators and congressmen, famous ones, among whom were Harry Truman. And when I asked Mr. Truman would he support my project, he said if Mr. Roosevelt is for it, he is for it. So at that point it was a wonderful feeling of support. But during my time at the White House, it was exciting just to be there first evening, I was privileged to have dinner with Mrs. Roosevelt and a few of her friends, and she asked us, would we like to meet the president? And we said, of course we would. And she took us down in the elevator to a study down below where the president and Mr. Churchill were having their dinner and having a meeting, I guess. And we, all of us, interrupted the two of them.
What year was this?
1941.
So was this before America was at war with Japan?
It was, no, on December 7th, 1941, we entered the war with Japan.
Interesting.
But this was when Mr. Churchill came to America, and I will subsequently tell you about why he came in a few minutes. Anyway, that evening we shook hands with the President and Mr. Churchill and retreated quickly upstairs again. It was very strange to me that she would interrupt two of the world's leaders to meet people who were very nondescript, including me. But that was a very high honor and a privilege. And the next day I was destined to leave before noon, and she asked me to please stay because she said it would be interesting. So of course I changed my plans, and in the morning she took her grandson and me on a tour of Washington for about 45 minutes, and it was a very interesting time for me to watch the relationship between a grandparent and a grandson. I was very touched by what I saw, and I enjoyed that very much. And when we returned to the White House, she said, go up and get ready, we're going to have lunch, and I think it'll be interesting. So I couldn't imagine what was going to happen. But when I came down, we were ushered into the dining room, and I saw it was a very large table for about 20 people, and they had place cards, and so I had to find my place. When I found my place, I was astounded because I was sitting directly next to Mr. Churchill. Just as I'm sitting with you, Laura,
That's beautiful.
I was sitting.
How interesting.
It was
And an honor.
Yes, it was.
Quite an honor.
It wasn't only an honor, it was deliberately done,
Okay.
I think, because she wanted him to understand that her interests went to the youth of
That's
America.
beautiful.
But that was very good with me because I was,
That's
actually-
what you were supporting.
that's right, I was actually
your
the
mission.
honoree at that time.
Right.
Now, I was very much, I guess I was scared.
Okay.
Maybe that's,
It's
I don't
okay.
know, scared, I can't
Right.
say scared. But I was very much pleased, and my thoughts were, what am I going to say to him? You know,
Right.
I was at that point
Yes.
20 years old. And at 20, you're not sure of yourself completely. I'm not sure of myself now at
Right.
92. So I
That's
surely
okay.
wasn't sure at 20.
Right.
In any event, it went very well because our conversation, although it was brief, it was interesting to me. He wanted to know why I was sitting next to him.
Oh.
He said that.
He said, what are you doing here?
Oh.
You mean at the White House?
At the White House.
That's
What was I doing next to him?
Oh.
I'm not sure it was what was I
Oh.
doing at the White House. He wanted to know how come he's sitting next to some young
Yes.
college student.
Right.
And that was a
It's a learning
challenge.
experience for him as well.
That's
And
right.
it opened him up to
Maybe.
see you.
Who knows? In any event, I explained my mission, and he was very attentive and listened and humphed a little bit.
Oh.
And then proceeded to talk to the president. And the conversation at lunch was primarily about ships that they were requesting the United States to supply for the war abroad.
This was the Lend-Lease program in
That's
those
right.
days? Oh,
And
but-
you remember that he came to Washington to try to get ships for the Normandy invasion. That was probably why he was there. In any event, he didn't tell me that, but I read that in the newspapers. So it was the lunch went very well for the rest of it because there was constant conversation. I was sitting next to Judge Sam Rosenman, who at that time was a prominent jurist.
Interesting.
And so he didn't pay much attention to me, and I didn't pay much attention to him because I was very interested in what Churchill and Roosevelt were talking about. That was a very big highlight for me. I left the White House up on a cloud, and I went back to school with lots of good memories of Washington.
Mrs. Stern, may I ask a Julia Child question? What did they have for dinner?
Good question.
Now, was the food good?
I would like to
Or
get...
they need another caterer?
You know that I would like to get the menu because, to tell you the truth, I can't remember not one thing that I ate that day, and I guess it's because I was so concerned and
nervous,
excited
excited
that the food meant very little to me. That's not true in the rest of my life. Food means a great deal to me.
Right.
So that was my beginning, and the beginning with Mrs. Roosevelt was really just a beginning because my contact with her lasted until a year before she died.
Which was when?
1962. She died in 1962, and the last letter I had from her secretary was in 1961.
It's 20 years.
Telling me how sick she was.
Now, for the boys and girls out there, for the kids, I want a historical note on record here. Court recorder is our camera. There was a time people wrote each other letters. They used pens, papers, typewriters. Have you heard of a typewriter? Even before electric typewriters. Now you text and SMS and Facebook message and Twitter message. People actually were men and women. A man of letters, or a lady of letters, was someone who took out his quill pen and his ink bowl, and he scribbled like Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin and John Adams. People actually had more than a 20-second attention span and wrote letters. Maybe there's something good about that, and we could use a little bit of letter writing nowadays too. I'm not to send you text messages, but it wouldn't hurt if you wrote Grandma and Grandpa, for example, a letter too,
Good
2
point.
pages, what you're doing and why you make their life wonderful. That's
The art of letter writing, it becomes special and personal, and I love that. I love seeing someone's handwriting and when it comes from the heart. I think
Well,
that's
today
important.
people can print the emails that they get
That's
if they
true.
want
Right, to
and
say-
keep them
keep
because,
them.
as you know, I have a book
Yes.
here,
Right.
and in the book I have all the letters, copies of the letters that she wrote me, and
Right.
many of them are signed. Of course, they were typed because she had a secretary who was very.
Oh, beautiful.
But look, here she, in
Historical.
her own hand,
May I hold this
wrote.
up?
Yes.
She has a beautiful, if you can see it from here,
Beautiful
handwriting,
handwriting.
Mrs. Roosevelt, her signature.
And she had invited me to an afternoon in 1959. That's 3 years before she died.
Wow.
And invited me to come at a New Year's Day afternoon.
How beautiful.
And in her own hand, she wrote to bring my daughter. which
Oh, how
was very
special.
personal.
See,
Yeah, I
she
see
wrote
that,
in
yeah.
her, she highlighted it with her to bring her daughter.
So
And
she was using her
that's so
pen.
special.
Yeah, I see that.
So that came from the heart, how her
A nice,
love
nice,
and sincerity was
See,
written.
when she crossed out.
right, a nice fountain pen too, I can see.
Yeah, listen, she crossed out it. The typewriter said Miss Manners, she crossed out, put Naomi. The
Yeah,
typewriter
more
said
personal.
very sincerely, she crossed out affectionate.
Oh, how
So
beautiful.
she
That's
was very
touching.
personal in
She
many
was.
ways.
Did she tell any jokes? Did she have a
Yes,
good
she
sense
had
of
a
humor?
good sense of humor. I can't remember the jokes, but she told them. She also, I didn't tell you this, but she came to my graduation,
Wow.
and she was the guest speaker.
Can I just
Oh,
hold this up a
that's so-
second?
what an
That's
honor.
Mrs. Roosevelt
And me.
and
And me.
Naomi Stern together at the graduation from Hunter College.
That's
So
right, in
special.
1942. That's
And-
how long ago.
Oh,
June of 42.
When I first met Naomi at the 5-star premiere here in Yonkers many years ago, I was so astonished she went to Hunter because I went to Hunter. And we had that in common. And that was a special link. And she gave me a mug from her alumni gathering, which I cherish and have my coffee out of every morning.
That's
And-
good.
Laura has MS in counseling from Hunter's.
No, Mercy College.
And you're a certified drama
From
therapist
Hunter. Hunter College, yes.
That was, what, 3 years ago?
About 5 years
5
ago.
years ago.
What about you, Lowell?
Me?
Yes.
I'm not a certified drama therapist.
No, but you're a very good interviewer.
Oh, I think Mrs. Stern means where did I go to college? I went to Swarthmore College. No, it's not Skidmore College, a small, is it girls' school in upstate New York? It's Swarthmore, a Quaker college outside of Philadelphia. And I went there for 2 reasons. One was I wanted a small liberal arts college and not a university. And 2, I was attracted to the teachings of the very early Quakers, such as George Fox and John Woolman, which I read. And 3, it had a branch of the Royal Scottish Country Dance Society. That was important to me, because even though I'm Jewish, my religion in college was going Scottish country dancing every Friday and or Saturday night. One of those nights was the practice, the other was the dances, and they were always followed by a Scottish version of an enormous kiddush with enough food for 10 times the number of people, all served with beautiful silverware and trays and teapots and scones and haggis and bridies. If you don't know what it is, look it up. Maybe I'll include links to Wikipedia for you for that. That was my religion in college, and I enjoyed it very much. And I still have my kilt, and if you go to my Facebook album, I have 2 albums of me and my kilt, and at Purim 2012 and 2013. If it's not too hot, I'll be modeling my kilt again this coming Purim in 2 months in Jerusalem. Mrs. Stern, do you want to say something before we conclude about Eleanor Roosevelt's Israel-Zionist connection? She was a lifelong friend of the Jewish people and the state of Israel.
Yes. I understood that she was connected in a very personal way to many people who were Jewish as well. I don't know much about her organization work. She could not share that with me, but I do know that she was a friend to Joe Lash, who was a very prominent guy at the time, and also the editor of PM, who was Jewish.
What's PM?
PM was a very important newspaper in the 40s. Interesting, you don't know it.
I don't know it at all.
In Israel?
No, here in America.
Oh, here in America,
And the
PM.
editor of PM was a fellow by the name of Jimmy Wexler.
Was it a Philadelphia or New York-based paper?
It was must have been a Washington paper.
Oh.
Now, Mrs. Stern has me interested because she knows I'm a history buff, and the history of newspapers in the United States, going back to the early 1700s, when people printed pamphlets and the town crier read them to everyone. Actually, most Americans in colonial America were very literate. Most people could actually read, but they couldn't necessarily afford a paper. So you put it up on the church, the bulletin board, you tacked up the flyer or
I
the
never
broadside
knew
or
that.
Thomas Paine's. These are the times that try men's souls. Wars were fought with pamphlets, and the early colonial papers. I know about Pulitzer in the 19th century, and as we discussed with Mrs. Stern, Joseph Pulitzer helped finish the construction of the Statue of Liberty. The government ran out of money. He put in his papers a notice, I want every American to send me $1 in an envelope. I'll give it all to the government and they'll finish putting up the Statue of Liberty. He got $100,000, $1 from 100,000 people, and they did finish it. And that I know about newspapers in the 19th century. The 20th century I have to do my homework on. So
Okay,
PM is on our, remember boys and girls out there, I'm talking about the students I worked with the last few years, you got to be literate, cultured, and educated, so I want you to look up PM, and the editor was
Jimmy Wexler.
Jimmy
James
Wexler.
But that was at my time. Now, I don't know, later on, I think it folded.
We don't have so many papers left these days.
This is here. Here it is, PM.
May I hold it?
How interesting.
That's your photo with Mrs. Roosevelt.
That's one of them.
PM, the newspaper, edited by Jimmy Wexler, and Mrs. Roosevelt with Naomi Stern in the photo together.
And this is
Very
from the
good.
New York Times, of course. All these are from the Times. These were pictures taken at Campobello. Very
That's
interesting
very
group
interesting.
of pictures, and you
Historical.
see how lucky I was. I
Yes.
was a very lucky student.
You sure were.
Wow, that's
I
incredible.
may not have been the top honor student, but what I got out of college was a lot more than academics, and that's an interesting point. It helped me in my business career, it helped me in my social career. It was a very wonderful stepping stone for my future. And I hope that everybody understands that education is, for children, is the most important thing you can do for them. Because that was my parents' wishes. It's my wishes. My daughter had a very good education. She became a lawyer. And my grandson is at present graduated from Yale and is applying to law school. So we are all very tuned in on being well educated, because to live in this world and not know what goes on
I agree,
politically
absolutely.
is a blind thing.
That saved me too, Naomi.
Good.
Education, that to become a drama therapist was the best therapy, and education-wise, it helped me in I found myself, and now I'm able to help others through my work creatively.
Ladies, do you have any concluding comments before we wrap up this first interview?
I have no concluding comments. Will have many comments to continue in life with Laura, and I
Thank
hope
you.
now with Lowell.
Right.
And we will continue to be friends.
So we
That's
say
good.
to you, and we're recording
Yes.
this in Riverdale, New York. That's all. Stay tuned, and that's all for now, folks. And thank you very
Thank you
much,
so
Mrs.
much.
Stern,
Thank
for the
you,
wonderful
Naomi.
Thank you
interview.
very much.
And thanks to our viewers for listening and watching.
Thank you.
And that's the end. You have a